Adilia story. Today is always gone tomorrow. Umupae. They watched the dance. Buried memories. Wisps of smoke danced in the night air as the master of the ceremony put the last stone on the food. It was a spectacular show, with men painted in traditional patterns, dances, and stories about the origin of Umu. The food was now cooking in the ground, wrapped in banana leaves and surrounded by hot volcanic stones. It would take the next few hours, time that the tourists were meant to spend getting acquainted with Rapa Nui culture and learning the steps of some traditional dances. Martine, her face already painted, looked curiously over Adelia's shoulder. Adilia didn't even notice. She was focused on scribbling something in a battered traveler's notebook. "What are you so busy writing?" asked Martine. "Mostly memories, my dear," the older woman smiled, closing the notebook. "I have one to share if you want to listen." She didn't reach for the notebook, though. It seemed she'd have no problem remembering that particular trip. "Nothing can ever happen twice," she started. Today is always gone tomorrow. Africa. Chapter 1. Look at the coffin. The coffin looked like an airplane. It looked like it'd been built from warped wooden planks. The paint didn't even cover the wood in some places. But there was no doubt about it. It was an airplane. It had wings, a tail, a Ghanaian airline logo, little windows painted on it in a shaky hand, and even a ladder. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Do you like it?" somebody asked. It was the funeral custom here. The coffin shape was connected to the person's occupation, their character, and their hobbies. I'd seen coffins shaped like shrimp, wine bottles, cars, even shoes. "Do you like it?" they asked again. "Yes, I do. It's a beautiful way to show how much we cared about her." It always amazed me how lightly and beautifully death could be treated. Now this strange artifact contained my friend's body. The mourners danced around the coffin, pouring liquor on it to call forth ancestral spirits. It was something else. Fascinating, I thought, with an almost clinical detachment. But I wasn't there as a reporter. Not this time. I hadn't been to Africa for what seemed like an eternity. The last time I'd visited Ghana was almost 30 years earlier. Everything here reminded me of Adwa. The smell of the air, the prints of the dresses, the sing-song cadence of her language, Twi, which I never learned. She was Ashanti, a descendant of the people who'd built Ghana and ruled in it before the British came. Nowadays, the Ashanti king wasn't important as Ghana's president. The funeral was grandiose, just as I'd expected. It wasn't uncommon for families to spend thousands of dollars on them. The coffin alone must have cost hundreds. There were fresh flowers everywhere, and canopies hung over tables piled high with all kinds of food from around the world. I even spotted some hamburgers. She was a worldly person, after all. If she'd been there, I bet she'd have laughed at all the unnecessary pomp. Why hadn't she told me she was ill? Why hadn't she written to me about it? Why hadn't she wanted to see me? Why hadn't I called? I hadn't been in contact with her for so long. When her father called me to tell me that she died of pancreatic cancer, for a minute I couldn't understand who he was talking about. "Who is this? Is this a joke?" I snapped. "No," he said, and something in his voice made my heart sink. Funny how you can feel your heart fall through your body to the ground, leaving a gaping hole behind. 28 years ago, at Kotoka International Airport, Accra, Ghana. We'd met almost 30 years before. I'd been sent to Africa by Journal de Notices to research a long, in-depth piece on magic in Ghana and Togo, what they called juju. Young, lithe, and full of enthusiasm, I hurriedly swung my bags onto the conveyor belt at the check-in counter in the Accra airport. And then I saw her. She was on the other side of the counter, taking care of the bags and passengers, her head crowned with a magnificent set of braids. "Just my luck," she said. "The moment my colleague goes for lunch, everyone comes at once." "Sounds like a curse," I answered. She smiled. I was packing my books and papers when she touched my battered copy of one of Anais Nin's journals. "I always wanted to read her work, but it's so hard to get," she said. On impulse, I handed her the book. "Give me your phone number," I said. "I'll pick it up when I come back." "When do you come back?" she asked. "Soon. I'm doing research on an article for Juju." There was a glimmer in her eyes. "I might be your perfect source then." Once the plane was up in the air, I wondered what had come over me. I didn't even know when, or even if, I was coming back. So why had I said it would be soon? And why had I given my beloved book away to her just like that? I think it was fate. Birds of a feather. In the end, she actually did turn out to be a perfect source. She gave me back my book. I lent her some Eric Jong, and within no time our friendship flourished. Her name was Adoa. We talked about art, politics, and love. She took me to a theater to see Anoa by Ama Ata Aidu, and we argued about the importance of having children. I shared my fascination with Paula Rego and her Dog Woman series. "How appropriate," she scoffed. Then she told me how nobody really cared about the rights of women. Women were treated like domestic animals. They were expected to work, give birth, and cook. I knew what she meant. I remembered that from my youth. Salazar. One night, when she got drunk, she told me not to believe anybody, because everybody lied, herself included. She said it was because of colonialism, that it had destroyed their morality. I listened and said nothing. It was her story. And then she said that it was very useful to believe in God, but that it was even more useful to believe in more than one God, and that no matter what God you believed in, you should be scared of Juju. "Do you believe in Juju?" I asked. "My mother told me that when I was born, I was cursed to be forever unhappy. So I had a simple choice, to believe it and be unhappy, or to ignore her and be happy. Simple, isn't it?" She would leave in the morning to go to work, and I would stay and write. I was young, I had the money, and I was doing what my mother had told me to do when I was little. Run as far away from my oppressive city as possible. Now, in the present day, as I looked at that absurd coffin, it all came flooding back. Adoa's words about Juju rang in my ears, more palatable than ever, especially here in her hometown, surrounded by her relatives. I shivered. I was tired. I'd gotten up at the crack of dawn to catch the bus at 6 a.m. That morning, at the bus stop, I was all alone, and it dawned on me, ironically, that I'd forgotten about everyone's sense of time. If you were scheduled to leave at 6, people would come at 7, and you'd leave at 8. At about 7:30, everybody was finally there. Someone led a round of prayers for our safe journey. Then somebody needed to get their water. I started to laugh. sat down, and reached for my book. A plump woman in a beautiful red dress handed me some food. I took it eagerly. It was rice with vegetables and some meat that looked suspiciously like tripe. I didn't ask. When you are offered food in Africa, you eat and you are grateful. So I ate and felt grateful. I was even more grateful for the liquor she passed me. "Why are you wearing black?" she asked. "Because that's the custom in the country I'm from." "How strange. We wear red." "I know. I have a red brooch." Her eyes were bright red from crying. I wondered for a moment whether she was going to the funeral because it was always the biggest party in Ghana, or if she was someone related to my friend. "I'm Amma," she said, "Adoa's sister." The name didn't ring any bells, but then in Ghana, people are called their friends and distant relatives, brothers and sisters. And that's when I had the strangest conversation of my life. When you die, how many days do you want to spend in the morgue? "I don't care," I shrugged. "I'd be dead anyway." "How old do you want to be when you die?" I never thought about it. I'd rather not die. Another question. How much money do you spend on funerals in Europe? I tried to remember, but the questions wouldn't stop. More than on a wedding? Probably not. But you have a funeral party, right? Just family and friends. A party then, good. I sat there, my head spinning because of the conversation and the alcohol. Suddenly, I was in the middle of a cell phone contest. Phones don't need to be used in Ghana, but they are social status symbols. You need to have the right one. My iPhone barely made it past the first round. It was big enough, but it didn't have any glitter. Not only was the winner's Samsung as big as a small TV, but it also had a case covered in golden flowers. I could see myself there. Just some woman, sad and lost, in a place where her friend no longer was. Present day, Adoa's father started to read her obituary. He was just as I remembered him, stern, composed, proud. She was baptized on April 2nd, 1963. She took her first communion on May 12th, 1970. She was happily married. And at that, I stopped listening. I didn't want to hear about her father's imaginary ideal daughter. Her entire life was devoted to what she dreamt of doing, managing an airport. At least I could agree with him on that. She loved her job. The talk. The band was terrible. The singer was even worse. He sang about God being everywhere, and then everyone joined in, dancing around the coffin. I drank another shot of home-distilled akapeshi. My legs felt weak. I could barely move. Adoa's father was standing there on the sidelines, alone. I walked up to him. "I didn't think you would come," he said when he saw me. "I didn't think you would invite me," I answered. "You were important to her. I don't want to anger her ghost." He looked at me with sadness. "But you don't belong here. If you ask me, you should go back to your country as soon as possible." And he walked away. Her ghost. I didn't want to anger her either. The party. Then the feast began. There was fried fish, kenki, shito sauce made of dried fish and powdered shrimp, fufu, banana bread, fried plantain, chateaubriand, all kinds of meats, bean soup, and a tankerload of akpateshi. I adapted. I picked up the forgotten skill of eating with my hands with ease. When everyone's plate was empty, a chorus of voices yelled, "We want more!" People hugged and drank to each other's health. I was starting to see why families spent all of their money on funerals. And before long, people started telling stories. I felt numb, and after hearing a few of their stories, a deep, unmovable pain pierced me. They brought back the Adilia I knew. Do you remember how she got mad at Fifi for carrying her daughter on her back without talking to the child? She said that the little one wouldn't learn how to talk to people. She was something, wasn't she? Yes, she was. She was never afraid to speak her mind and live the way she wanted. Or how she told us not to take gifts from passengers. You might as well tell the sun not to shine. We always did it, and she was so mad when we found out. She'd taken books from me, but maybe that was different. And then they started to talk politics. Ghana's a stable democracy. Look around. We're doing fine, aren't we? I dozed off. Every single Obroni can fuck off. I woke up. Sorry, Adilia. Don't take it personally. You're okay. We know you. Amma leaned over to me. Come on, we need to stop all the political talk. Today's about Adwa, not about men's egos. Some of them were tense, I could see it. They didn't know what to expect, what memories this stranger would share. I remember the first time we went to a hairdresser. I started. Accra, 26 years ago. The hairdresser. I looked at her braids and thought, what does she want to change? They're perfect. But she was adamant. I haven't washed my hair in 3 weeks, she said, and tomorrow there are flights from the US coming, so I have to look good. She didn't answer when I asked why. If you want to, you can have your hair braided too, she said instead. Of course I wanted to, even though my hair was nothing compared to hers. She dragged me inside. Adwa's favorite hairdresser had her place in the middle of the labyrinth that was the market behind the railway station. We were in a hurry. We'd caught a ride before I was even able to ask where we were going. When we got out of the trotro, I had no idea where I was. The market attacked my senses. It was overwhelming. A washcloth seller attached his goods in a basket on his head, while an old lady was weighed down by a bag full of mushrooms, and when 3 young girls in school uniforms almost walked into me, I fell into a fabric merchant who was showing a beautiful piece of cloth to a client. A brony, he murmured. Whitey, I knew that much. Charity Hair Salon, named after the owner, looked like the inside of a wardrobe. Every single inch of the walls was covered in images cut out of magazines. Adwa sat in the chair and sighed with pleasure as Charity started to undo her hair. I was mesmerized. Her lush hair turned out to be what seemed like millions of smaller braids that were being released one by one. 3 young assistants swarmed around them, craning their necks to see what the owner was doing. Our hair is our most beautiful jewelry, said Charity. For such a long time, we wanted to have white people's hair. But it is so boring, she said, with her lilting, melodic voice as she worked. I admired her skill. She had a tool that looked like a crochet hook that she used to choose a few strands of hair, then attach a long, thin bunch of artificial braiding hair to them to form a spiral. That was the base. Then she wrapped a thicker bunch of braiding hair around that and weaved the rest of the braid. After repeating the process over 100 times, she lifted the braids up and pinned them into an intricate crown. They don't pull on the skin so much when they're up, she explained. It's so beautiful, I said, from the bottom of my heart. Really? Adwa looked at me with a glint in her eye. Now it's your turn. I showed them the picture we'd taken that day. We laughed, then we cried, then we laughed some more.